Let's see. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Thank you for being today. I wanted to do a little introduction of Eve. I don't know, where am I? Here I am. Okay. Um, so, Eve Marko is a Zen teacher, author, longtime social activist who worked closely with Bernie Glassman, her husband and partner. Also, he was the founder of the Zen Peacemakers. She edited several of Bernie's very important books, including Instructions to the Cook, Bearing Witness, a Zen Master's Lessons in Making Peace, and The Dude and the Zen Master, featuring with Jeff Bridges. She has co-authored the book of Householder Koans, Waking Up in the Land of Attachments with Roshi Wendy Egyoku Nakao. And of course, she and Bernie started the amazing Bearing Witness retreats at Auschwitz over, 25 years ago now. And she's also written a wonderful novel, a fiction trilogy called The Dogs of the Kiskadee Hills, Hunt for the Lynx. That was fabulous. So she continues to teach and write from her home in Western Massachusetts. And I'm honored to call Eve Marko my friend. Right. Here you go, Eve.
Thank you, Jane. Let's see. Do you guys have the snowstorm we have? They all say it's the same snowstorm. Really interesting. It's gorgeous. Okay, when June, who I just love, along with her husband, asked me, what will I write about? Is there a way of getting rid of that echo? Or maybe it's because I'm here.
No, I'm gonna mute us.
Oh, okay, thank you. I said, what do you want to talk about? I said, without even thinking, I said, I'm going to talk about not knowing. Now, why did I do that? Because just a few days earlier, I talked to my dear friend Michelle Dobbs. Many of my friends are just wonderful Zen teachers. And Michelle, whose training was a little bit more Rinzai, gave me his three things of the three tenets. The three tenets is what Bernie coined as a foundation for the Zen peacemakers: not knowing, bearing witness, and taking loving action. And Michelle has had different versions of these, some funnier than others. And this one he talked to me about, and he said, Eve, empty the mind, bear witness, do something. Empty the mind, bear witness, do something. Usually we define not knowing as letting go of fixed ideas. And I always liked that because I thought of my mind as this continual, what's it called, like one of these tapes you have in Times Square in New York City. It just goes on and on and on with the same news, same clips, in this repetitive way, and nothing stops it. And that's how I think of our mind. It just goes on and on and on. And you can just stop paying attention. Michelle, in his more Rinzai way, said, no, empty the mind. I said, okay, I'm going to really empty the mind. So when I started sitting again after that conversation, I said, okay, it's no mind now. I'm just sitting. And it was interesting because, as you know, we have six senses. So there's the usual five senses, and Buddhism says there's another sense, and that sense is our mind. And I said, okay, so empty the mind means I'm sitting with my five senses. That's my sense of shikantaza. I'm not talking about any other form of meditation now. I'm sitting with fully alive five senses. My smell, my taste, which, I just felt something I drank, what my sight, touch, and so on. I'm just sitting with these. And these senses are my gateways to the world. So when sometimes people say, oh, you're sitting, it's like, you're doing nothing. No, I'm not doing nothing. I'm completely alert through these five senses. I'm completely engaged because they get me engaged. Those are the gateways to everything. So Zazen is not a do-nothing practice. We sometimes say, well, just sit. Well, yeah, when we just sit, we're sitting with five senses completely wide awake. We're not shutting out the world. Now, sometimes my attention will veer. So let's say because I drank something, I'm very aware of what the taste is now in my mouth. If a bird, right now it's right there, in the bird feeder, my attention might veer to that, or it might veer to something I'm hearing. The dogs, the plows, whatever. But basically, I'm sitting with five fully awake senses. What is not there? What is not there is my sixth sense. Now, of course, the sixth sense goes on and on and on, like I said, but I am not paying attention to that at all. I've emptied the mind. So it's that mind, it's that sixth sense that brings all the separation with it. It brings the comments, the observations. Oh, wow, it's really sticking. Oh, ooh, it does look cold. Or I wonder when we're going to get plowed out. Probably not till tomorrow late. Or I wonder if it still is cold outside. Or what am I going to do? And am I cooking this afternoon? All the things that come through our mind, which are not bad. No, we need that sometimes. But do we need it during Zazen? I don't think so. Really, it's really a wonderful experiment. Imagine doing anything, doing Zazen, cooking, feeding the dogs, sweeping. There'll be a bunch of things I'm gonna do today. And imagine that at that, you can just see how you're doing it regularly and then say, I'm going to empty the mind. Now, what are you doing? Now, have a sense of that. What happens when you do not label? You're not drawing comparisons. All the consciousness of it, the observer, the dualities that come in. When I do that, I come in and you come in. It's important to understand why this is so difficult to do. Imagine that, let's say I decided to blindfold myself. I'm not going to use the sense of vision. So I just blindfold myself. Is that difficult? Is it not particularly? Why is this so difficult? Because it's so countercultural. We have been conditioned and trained from the day we're born that the mind is who we are, and that's what makes us so superior, makes our species so superior. So when I try to empty that mind, empty that, put aside that sense of self, I am doing something totally countercultural, totally counter to any way I was trained, how I was raised, and to my deepest conditioning to this very day. You know, as Bernie used to say, whenever he had to introduce himself, especially in front of a big group of people, and especially if they were not Zen, he would say, my name is Bernie Glassman. I am an addict. I am an addict to the self, and I will always be an addict to the self. I will always be addicted. He did not fool himself that all those years of practice and all those years of this and that ended his addiction to the self. No, he knew that. And in that sense, all of us share that addiction. So when I do that, I start noticing the world in a different way. And why is that? Because if there is no separate consciousness, there is nothing to divide me from all of life. You can test it just like that. You don't even have to sit zazen. Imagine you're just, I don't know, looking out the window, or you've gone to hang laundry and say, I'm going to just I'm going to just empty the mind. Now, how does this feel to you? Do you say, oh, I hate hanging laundry. Why don't I have a dryer? And I wish if I was in Florida, I'd be able to hang things up outside. Boy, that heat would be really nice. Boy, and on and on. Now imagine none of that was there. Your relationship to life would be really different. So it's really worthwhile doing, even half a dozen times a day, aside from your Zazen practice. What happens when I just drop the mind? And now I'm just doing this. How does things look to me? And in fact, they don't look to me anymore because me is not there. But I'm experiencing the same thing in a different way without that I. And sometimes we think it's bringing in the I that makes it so interesting because we have so much to think about and all that. But actually, we have it in our power to experience life really differently when we do that, when we empty the mind. And so, of course, this brought up a very famous koan that some of you may know. I had to remember the language. Kenpo, I should correct June, I haven't been teaching actively locally in a very long time. I kind of retired from that. But what I am still doing is very active with Zen peacemakers, especially the order. So this one is Master Kempo. Monk asks him, what's the road to nirvana? What's this practice? And Kempo held up his stick, drew a line, and said, here it is. Here it is. That's emptying the mind. You don't need to look at it, think about it. You don't need to interpret it. You don't need to create a relationship between it and yourself and all those things we do. Here it is. This is it. So that's one half of that koan. But the half that has always fascinated me way more is when the koan goes on. And the koan goes on, and the same monk asked Uman for his instruction to this question. So what is this practice? What are we doing? And Uman held up his fan and said, this fan, or let's say, this nail polish, has jumped up to the 33rd heaven and hit the nose of the deity there. The carp of the eastern sea leaps, and it rains cats and dogs. Now, that's a pretty different answer. He didn't say, oh, it's just here. No, it's this line, right here. No, and not only does he give all these crazy details and wonderful, but they are crazy. How many of you know about a fan that jumps, or a nail polish that jumps up to the 33rd heaven and hits God's nose. Or the carp, the fish of the eastern sea that leaps and it's raining cats and dogs. Well, it may be raining cats and dogs, but what I see is snow, right? So what is that answer? First you say, Eve, empty the mind. And now you add all these things that not only are like a lot of things, but I don't get it. I don't see any fish jumping up. I don't see cats and dogs coming down. I see snow. I don't see any of that. So what is that crazy answer about? And it's so wild. Take a moment to appreciate the wildness of it. Cats and dogs coming down and fish jumping up and all these things and hitting God's nose and wow, what fun, but isn't it wild? Yeah, that's what it is. Life is wild because we imprison ourselves in our rationality. That's the other side of being so attached to this, of having this addiction to the voice that will start parsing things and explaining things and commenting on things. It doesn't make room for the wild. It doesn't make room for the imagination. I'm a big fan of this book, which I'm sure you must have seen, The World Could Be Otherwise, by Norman Fisher. It's a wonderful book. And what he says here, he talks about all the data we get through the media, through social media, through AI. He writes, I am convinced, and we get all this picture of the world, I'm convinced that the world could be, and actually is otherwise, that its possibilities need not be, and actually aren't, limited to the tangible, the knowable, the negotiable, to the data we're constantly collecting. Data gives us the illusion that we know the world. That's this mind. Same thing. The mind gives us the illusion that we know the world. But the world is more than we know. The imagination doesn't measure, devise, or instrumentalize. It doesn't define or manipulate. Instead, its nature is to open, to mystify, to delight, shock, inspire. It extends without limit. It leaps from the known to the unknown, soaring beyond facts to visions and intensities. It lightens up the heavy, circumscribed world we think we live in. It plays in the deep end, where heart and love hold sway. And then one more sentence. Spiritual practice is one of the key sites of imagination. That's what we need. We need the imagination. Or as another wonderful writer, philosopher wrote, you know how often you hear the words, see clearly, see clearly. And Maria Popova writes, seeing clearly is the work of the imagination, of the willingness to investigate imaginatively what lives behind the masks people wear, what hides in our own blind spots. Or that the great Iris Murdoch. Imagination is a kind of freedom, a renewed ability to perceive and express the truth. And that's something, how often have you been taught and told that everything, isn't worthwhile unless it's based on some objective truth, on what the mind tells you is happening, something verifiable, something tangible. And here are these wonderful people saying, no, it ain't. No, it ain't. Seeing clearly is seeing the imagination at work. The imagination showing you that while you think that's snow coming down, it's actually cats and dogs. And a fish can leap up to the heavens and touch the nose of God. Did you know that? You will never know that with this. Um, but you can, and it's not just seeing things that we don't usually see, that we don't usually envisage. I find when it comes to the deep truth, the huge truth in the littlest particle, that's when the imagination really works for me. It's like what each tiny snowflake is. Wow. We know that the tiniest piece encapsulates all of life, the entire universe. We know that. We've read about it. And yes, you can say, well, you can use your mind because you can say, well, here is this drink, and this mind will analyze it. And I'm sure you've read this analysis that the drink is a combination of water and some kind of juice, and the water comes from here and the juice comes from here, and that means that it has to be, the sun has to shine on it, the rain has to come down, and that's how we grow things, and that's how all of life comes into every little piece. That's a brainy way of describing it. I think Bernie, in one of his a wonderful book, and I did not edit Instructions to the Cook, but I did edit his great book on the Heart Sutra, whose name I forgot. But in one of those, in that book, he writes, well, you can think all that and see how every little thing really includes everything in the world, or you can just see it. Now, how do I just see it? How do I just see that this juice includes everything in the world? That this conversation, and I hope it'll become a conversation, is everything in the world? By emptying the mind, and this imagination comes up, sprouts up, and now you see it. You see so much in every little thing. This has become especially important for me in recent days, because I think that there are things happening and the way people are responding that have really nothing to do with the mind. And I'm talking about what's going on in Minnesota and what's going to be already starting in Maine. And I spent the last several days in contact with members of the Zen Peacemaker Order. What do we do? What do we do? And how do we contact centers and find out what's needed? And even if we can't fly there, how do we support them? What happens? So there was a lot of conversation about this and research going on. And I was very taken. Today I saw somebody posted, an old-time member he posted a photo of Alex Preddy, and who was killed, and he wrote, I cannot stop crying about this. He has a photo of Alex Preddy, and he says, I cannot stop crying about this. Now, this is a man who is twice as old as Alex Preddy was, and he lives, I believe, in either Southern Virginia or West Virginia. So he got very, very far apart. He was not a nurse when he worked. He was not in that profession, not Alex Preddy. And the man is saying, I cannot stop crying on account of this young man, Alex Preddy. And the force of empathy really hit me. How does somebody so much older, living in such a different reality, Not afraid over there, he lives rurally, that his town will be inundated by ICE agents and so on. No. And yet he can't stop crying. Where does empathy come from? Empathy doesn't come from the rational. What is possibly rational about it? Now, you can break it down into the rational, and people do. You can say, oh, he's crying because he's afraid that what happened over there is going to happen in his backyard, and he's already beginning to be concerned about his own safety. And and you start all these comparisons and psychological analyses about what makes people afraid and so on and so on. But I know Mark, the man who posted that. That is not where he came from. He came from empathy. He didn't break it all down and analyze it the way the columnists are doing. No. He said, look at a human being. Look at a human being. Wow. Empathy is one of the most irrational things you can imagine. I have seen so many examples where people are confronted by something that is shocking, and they right away go into the rational to explain it. So I wasn't, no, I'm not involved with it, but I used to be, and I still get very engaged, much less so now, with the Palestinian issue in Israel. So I remember there was this right-wing nut, settler nut, with a gun who came in, and he shot somebody, a Palestinian peace activist, I believe a film producer, and the man was killed. Talking with someone about that, I said, and the guy wasn't even imprisoned. He was sent into a house arrest, of all things. And the person I'm talking to, who's Israeli and a very fine man, believe me, says, now look, if you read the details of this, you would see that where that settler stood was about 2 meters away from where this demarcation line is. You see, that gave him his right to do that thing with his gun. And if he had stepped 2 meters down, I would agree with you. He was doing something illegal. But he was, like, as they like to say, holding his ground. 2 meters makes that difference. Just like in Gaza, if somebody is just close to that yellow line, what do you read? They crossed the yellow line. You see, that, and it doesn't matter the contents of what they say, just notice where they went. They went right into the rational. They crossed the yellow line. He did not step over the 2 meters that make that demarcation. They did not do this. They did not do that. Look at all the justifications we get from our government about what's going on. And notice how rational it always is. If they were like this and not like that. If they did this or if they that. I don't blame them. We all do that. But please notice that's not empathy. That's literally counting the trees and not seeing the forest at all. And I didn't mention this to my Israeli friend, but frankly, it echoed exactly what you see if you ever study the Holocaust and you read the rational explanations for what people did there. And they were plenty, and they were documented. They were so sure that rationally they were right that they actually documented it to show how right they were. That's many things. Many, many things. It's not empathy. There's no imagination there of what this feels like, how this might be for people. What is it to see your neighbors being taken away? What is it to see families being separated? That relies on empty the mind. I'm not saying we can't return to the mind. Sure, we could break all that down, and people do. You know, people parse out the videos and say, look at this second, now look at this half second, now look at this half second. I get all that. Me, I don't look at the videos because that's not my point. I'm not interested in any of that. I'm interested in the forest. I'm interested in what my heart resonates with. That, for me, by the way, is also not knowing. I'm in some way taking away the limits, the boundaries that keep me so narrow focused and usually so self-justifying, justifying my way of looking at life. And I say, oh, okay, you can always go back there. It will come back to you, believe me, no matter what, it'll come back. But for now, for a minute, for 10 minutes, for a half hour, for how long it takes, can you let that go? And what are you feeling now? That's empathy. And I think that that too is compassion. I've been reading, there's this big book I have of Iris Murdoch philosophizing about different things and breaking down this approach and that approach and this approach and that approach and all that. And all that's really interesting for philosophers, and I appreciate that very much. But even she admits that all the moralizers in our history are not able to really reach into a moral realm that has nothing to do with rationality. She knows that it does, that there is that dimension. It's hard for her as a philosopher to let that in. I think this practice is about empathy, and it's about imagination. And while my mind is very useful and will be useful the rest of the day in terms of many things, I cannot let it dominate the way I experience life. And therefore, how I bear witness and the actions that come up. I don't want it to take the place of imagination, and I don't want it to take the place of empathy. Because there is something there that wasn't born, isn't going to die. That's the energy that I want to let in. It's always there. It's never not been there. I was laughing, who did it? Oh, yes. Dostoevsky, the famous Russian writer, said, if you want to make sure that people don't escape prison, don't let them know they are in prison. He says that's the easiest way to prevent prison escapes, for people not to know that they're in prison. I suggest to you that many of us are in prison for at least part of the day. And we take, it's like, we take, I just had a flashback of a funny memory when I was in Scotland with my sister many years ago. And I was so used to, there's these gates many places have gates. And so I was just so used to thinking, oh, they're all locked and they're all locked. So we approached the gate and to some kind of a little footbridge. And what do? I just climb over the gate. I'm going to get over this gate. They're not keeping me out. My sister approaches, pushes a little, and the gate swings open. And she starts laughing and laughing and laughing at me, like, what a dummy her older sister is. And she's right, not a dummy, too bloody rational, too bloody habituated to a certain way of thinking. So I'd like to encourage us to let that go. Empty the mind, not just during shikantaza, but in whatever we do. And let these other magnificent ingredients that we're a part of emerge. Empathy, imagination. One of my favorite books, of course, trilogies, whatever it was. His Dark Materials. I don't know how many of you know that trilogy. It's magnificent. And the main actor in that trilogy is a young girl, Lyra. And she says, we need the things we can't explain, can't prove, or else we die of suffocation. We need the things we can't explain and can't prove. Otherwise, we'll just die of suffocation. Okay. That's all I want to say, because what I really like is to have like back and forth. We live in a very strong time, a powerful time, a time of what? A time of some destruction and also great potential, I think. Great potential. And so I wanted to really hear from you out in the Midwest. What comes up for you? What concerns you? And especially the question which I guess I'm going to be working with somewhere else. Is this practice sufficient? What concerns you? It's a very active question for me, I must tell you. Is this practice enough for me, given the life and the world I'm living in right now? So I'm hoping that we can have questions and comments, and believe me, I really enjoy that, and I think it brings things to life. So please, and I want to thank so much the two Roshis, Bob, or Joshin as I know him, and June Ryushin, who invited me to participate here with you this morning. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, cool. First of all, I want to say thank you so much. Today is my birthday, and I wanted to spend it here and start the day off because I think that I think this practice is everything that I need. I'm really grateful for everything that you just said, honestly, especially your reference to the addiction to the self. I recently just got out of rehab, and they talk a lot about addiction and how addicts, how the brain thinks in addictive thinking. And I was thinking of how this practice helps for me to see those patterns and also try to disrupt them through breath. So that's kind of how I'm perceiving it. And also, I think when you were talking about the sixth sense, I was thinking of animals and how they kind of operate without it sometimes, I guess, because they don't have that same language. I'm wondering what you think about that. Like, I'm trying to find a way to articulate it. I was just thinking of how, I guess, animals, a lot of them like have certain, I guess, languages and whatnot, but sometimes I wonder if human beings are more inferior than all the other creatures because of the fact that we do have the mind. Yeah, I don't know your thoughts on that, but that's just what I was thinking.
I'm not an expert in that in any way. But that thing of comparing ourselves, again, that's for me is more, it's good for the professionals. Yeah. I have dogs and I live in a rural area, so I'm surrounded by sheep and horses and wonderful things like that. And I do enjoy watching them a great deal. And I learn a lot. And you know what I learn mostly? I don't learn whether I'm better than them or they're better than me. What I learn is that they have access to an experience of life that I don't. So, for instance, my dog will hear things I cannot hear. She can smell things I cannot smell. So she's aware of things going on that this very superior species is not. It's just not. Or the birds, watching them yesterday and how aware they were, not only the freeze, but they seemed to be very aware of what's coming up. Me, if I didn't read the weather, and I'm not a sailor, I don't read the skies or the sun, I would have no idea. But they know. So for me, it's just another humbling kind of exercise, like, oh, you think you know everything. You think, you think, you think, you think. No, you don't. Look at what they're aware of that you are not aware of. So I find it refreshing and humbling and wonderful in that way to be with animals. That's all I can say.
Eve, I want to thank you. It was a wonderful talk, and I've told this story in the Zendo before, but I was reading Bearing Witness the day I met June Roshi through my synagogue at the time, and it all came together. And that year, I wound up going to the Zen Peacemakers retreat in Auschwitz. So thank you for your role in all of that. I wanted to comment for a second on one question you asked. Is our practice efficient? And I think for me,
I didn't ask if it was efficient. I said, is it sufficient or is it enough? That's what I believe that's what I said.
Okay, thank you. And now I'm going to be quiet because
I've never seen Ken offer to be quiet before.
Well, I would like to follow that up, if I may, Eve. Can you hear me, June?
Yes.
Okay. I'm very interested in what you meant by you're not sure it's enough. And do you feel, you said you were beginning to think about that, but could you explore that some with us?
Yeah, as long as you just remember that, as Bernie used to say, it's just my opinion, man. There's nothing true about it. But I think I have many of the struggles that you have. So I, in particular, have been really thinking about and doing some work around the question of system and how, if I want to change a system, is this practice enough? So 3 of us are going to be talking about this next month. I think it's an online thing. So I know wonderful bodhisattvas. In fact, I think my life is great because I'm surrounded by bodhisattvas. And they do the most beautiful work. They go into the prisons and they go into and working with immigrant families, which I do also, and they make connections and they organize. It's really wonderful. And I guess what I've been mulling over and really troubled by is, yes, but is it changing the system? That's been my big question. It started out as a question for the Democratic Party, of which I'm a registered voter. Are they changing the system, man? Or are we changing the system? And I felt, no, we're not, which is why so many people are disillusioned. And then over time, I started, as I talk with bodhisattvas, as I talk with people doing beautiful work that I deeply admire, I am not kidding. I wish I was younger so I could do more. You know what I mean? And Bernie was a great bodhisattva, and we were so involved in so many things hands-on. And in Bearing Witness, who was the person who mentioned it and whom I can't see. I can see Robin because she's online, but the group in the Zendo I can't really see except for a number of heads there, mention bearing witness. And we did a short chapter on changing the system. I remember it very well because we talked about it a lot, he and I. And I can't say that I felt that Bernie had an answer to that. And I didn't have an answer to that. We felt it was important enough to bring up in the book, and for me there was no answers. That wasn't a chapter of any answers. Not that the book was supposed to give answers anyway, but it is a question. Well, let's just say not the practice. Is the practice enough? Is one piece of it. Then the piece is what will change systems. What does change systems? I have no doubt that part of the practice that tells us to empty the mind or let go of your ideas about yourself, primarily who you are, and then out of that will fall away all kinds of ideas about others in life. That changes your system of how we are here. It certainly has for me. Enough? No, I'm still going on. But that question has troubled me. What does it take to change a system? And I'm sure it takes a lot of patience, of which I'm notoriously short of. There are many things I'd love to see before I die. So all that is in the mix for me when I say, is it enough to make changes, including when we face some very serious challenges that are systemic, global, maybe even existential? Is this enough? Or, as I've sometimes wondered, and as Marxists will point out to you all the time, you're just making the current system palatable. Yeah, so you built the Greyston organizations, you housed people, you gave jobs, this and this goes on. And in different countries, but what are you really doing? And so that's been on my mind, and I don't have an answer. Maybe Bob or June have answers. I'm very curious to have that dialogue. So I'm giving you a sense of what's in my mind around that.
Hi there. I'm one of the ones you can't see, but anyway, I am reading, working my way through Householders' Koans, which I love very much. So it's very exciting to hear you speak. And I have to say that I've been thinking a lot along those same questions about systems, because I've spent literally my entire life, since I was about 3 years old, working on environmental issues of various kinds. And I am now watching this administration. I can't even describe what they're doing. I mean, through policy, through action, and it's so unbelievably disheartening, and it's enough to shake your faith in what you're doing, even though I know that objectively what I'm even doing now is helpful, offering refuge to animals and plants in my work. But I don't know if I have an answer, but I sometimes think that systems are part of that great ongoing churn that the planet is always going through, and our human systems are tiny compared to that churn of the planet and what's happened on our planet in the last 4 billion years. And it's that churn, it's that ongoing. And one of the things that's making this crack up of civilization going on right now is more churn, partly because of us, And I'm talking about the climate change and the environment that a lot of people aren't talking about right now because of all the immediate human things that are going on. But I don't know if you can change the system. You can do the best you can, and you can take refuge where you can, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, but I don't know if you can in social change kinds of ways. And that sounds despairing, but I don't feel really despairing. Sorry. I talk a lot. Maybe as much as Ken.
Mayhaps.
And what's your name?
My name is Adrian.
Thank you very much. I'm so grateful to you because you remind me that the question isn't necessarily how do I change the system? The system's changing. System's changing all the time in a way that often I don't see. I need my imagination to see it. I need my empathy to see it. I don't necessarily need the New York Times to see it, you know? So I'm grateful to you very much for reminding me of it. A creative project I'm working on, speaking of imagination, is writing a play. And I got the idea of the play exactly when we had the No Kings weekend, I think in October it was. And there were different things that were so interesting that were happening to me that weekend that were, you know, how suddenly all things come together and you say, oh, I really should look at that. So I was in the town of Greenfield, and you had this big march that was coming down Main Street, and the person leading the march was dressed as the Statue of Liberty. So she's coming in, and she's green and carrying that beautiful thing and whatever it is she wears around her hair. And as I'm looking, and it says no kings, no kings, no kings. And as I'm looking at this, I'm saying, now imagine what would happen if we did have a king in the White House, but he was our king. He wasn't their king. He was the king of those of us who say, we can't wait anymore with climate change. We're endangering the planet. We're endangering species. And we have a government that is, it doesn't matter, Republican or Democrats, it moves slowly. It has the mechanism, the Constitution that makes it work, that everybody swears by or tries to show how they rely on the Constitution. Maybe the Constitution isn't the best document with which to meet these challenges. Maybe we do need a king. And that king will invoke certain powers and says, I'm no longer worried about the rights of states and whether Texas agrees here or Florida agrees here and what they're going to do with vaccines. I'm not worried about that anymore because the challenge facing us is so strong. I'm going to be a king and I'm going to do that. And I wondered how many of us would be marching down the streets if that kind of person was in the White House. So you see, that starts the imagination going. Now imagine there is someone like that. What would it take? Who would be the person who would come, who starts out being firmly a believer in our way of life, in our traditional democratic norms? And then what makes her, and I made it a her, what makes her change her mind? And I'm not making a rational argument here one way or another, but it's just a way of opening up and challenging ourselves and saying, wait a minute, what are we relying on? We've relied on this for almost 250 years, but is this the right thing to keep on relying on? So why am I telling you this? I just think that anything that frees us up from habitual thinking and the assumptions we make all the time and the usual things is really healthy. And that's why, I guess maybe that's why I'm talking about not knowing today.
Hi, Eve.
Hey, Joshin,
Hey,
so
it's
nice
good
to see you.
It's so lovely to hear you talk. What a wonderful question. Is practice enough? Or, even when you raise a question, is it enough to change the system? But we're part of the system too. And then, so to change the system is already, you have to step outside of it to change it. So that's kind of a conundrum to some degree, but you know, I think it's kind of a five-alarm fire at the moment. So to be talking about the Dharma, you know, the absolute and the relative or something is sort of beside the point, not appropriate in the moment that we're in because it's a fire and we got to, but then how do you put out the fire? And I guess what comes up for me is that we've been really lucky as Americans. We have been really, really lucky. And we've assumed all the while that we had freedom that was kind of given to us. But I'm not sure we ever really had freedom, or we thought it was kind of defined in a negative sense. But now that our luck has run out, I think we have to work a lot harder. And I don't think this is going to be easy. I think it is a five-alarm fire, and I think it's not legal. I don't think it's, you can think about this legalistically like a lot of people do, but I think it's more a question of values. Like, I think I love what you were saying about empathy. It's an embodied, values come from our embodiment. And Timothy Snyder, someone who I'm reading quite a lot now, talks about Lieb. It's a German word for the body, the embodied body, the subject. And there's another word for body in German, which is the object. And he says there's no freedom without that Lieb, with the body as a subject. And I think freedom is the value that allows any, I mean, without freedom, there is no values possible. So I think freedom actually becomes the thing to contemplate or to think about what does it mean to be free. And you know, like the Ukrainians, I sort of like, wow, they actually are fighting for freedom. And I don't think we've come up against that kind of edge at all. I think we're just not, and I think we're kind of facing that moment and none of us know what to do about it, but it's uh, so I don't think there's any answer. I love the question. I don't really want to answer it. I would just kind of like to sit with it. But man,
It's 12 o'clock.
anyway, it's love to see you. Lovely to see you, Eve. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Linda?
Thank you, Eve.
Well, thank you, Ba. It's always, yeah, it's always
I'm
great.
sorry, I'm muted. I'm sorry. Am I unmuted now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Uh,
Oh, okay.
yeah, we can hear you. Whether that means you're unmuted or not, I don't know.
Yes, I just unmuted myself. No, I said your question of can we change the system? Just the question itself is overwhelming to me. I can't even relate to it. Is the practice enough? For me, Zen practice has changed me. It has changed who I am. It's changed how I look at the world. I'm not Bernie Glassman. Excuse me. Bernie Glassman's are the ones you look to follow. He had solutions. I'll show you how to do this. But me? That should change the system is a crazy question. It's changed me. And I remember early on reading Zen will change the world one person at a time. And that's the way I look at it. Who do I start with? I don't start with the system. I start with the person in front of me and the person standing next to me. Like that's who I am. We need more Bernie Glassmans, the leaders of the world, the people that you can look to. Gandhi, Martin Luther King, But that's not me. I'm a follower. And that's how I follow. And it is good enough.
Okay, I have something real quick. I heard a lot of Eurocentric perspectives on system changing. I think most of the perspectives were relevant to that. My thought process is in following the people whose land originally was here, which is overwhelmingly, I've heard, land back, repatriation of the land that was stolen, and utilizing systems based on people who know this land, not the people like my family who immigrated here. So my thoughts is land back.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Eve, I think we've run out of time, but thank you so much. Thank you all. And after kinship hour, again, a little bit of Samu, and then some of us will be heading down to the march downtown. Okay?
Thank you, Eve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Be well. Be well, everyone. Take good care of yourselves.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.